Hi, my name is Budiji Eligwe, and I'm going to be doing the introduction and as well as the discussion parts and then parts of the conclusion as well. And so for the introduction, we start with the first bullet point, which says firm-specific non-market risks impose material costs for a firm. And I'm going to go deeper more. Firm-specific non-market risks arise from a variety of social, political, and environmental events that can impose material costs for a firm. Stakeholder mobilization through social movements can materially affect a focal firm and makes managing stakeholders a critical feature of corporate strategy. And it's also argued that the potential for localized negative externalities created when a firm located near environmentally sensitive water sources provides both the incentive and ability for local stakeholders to engage in collective action to prevent such externalities. This logic is applied to the global mining industry, and it is argued that collective action based on fear of scarcity and contamination of water is more likely the closer a mine is to environmentally sensitive water sources, and that the threat from collective action constitutes a potential firm-specific non-market risk. And now we say that the use of social movement theory to evaluate the ability of groups to undertake collective action. It has been applied more generally to collective actions by stakeholders of various kinds, organizing both within and outside of existing institutional structures. Social movement theory points to three critical mechanisms that facilitate collective action: the ability to mobilize resources, the strength and accessibility of government, and the ability to frame issues to mobilize the local and more distant communities and supportive stakeholders. Continuing on, we have that there are four main hypotheses tested in this paper. Number one, it was argued that mines located near environmentally sensitive water sources are subject to cost increasing collective actions by local stakeholders. That is, it is hypothesized that mine location in terms of proximity to the nearest significant water source increases firm specific non-market risks so that stock markets respond negatively to announcements related to mines located near such areas. Secondly, the effect of mine location was moderated by the nature of the ore being mined. Mines located near rivers were subject to greater risk because rivers extend the number of effective communities, increasing the probability of diffuse collective action. Stock markets negative response associated with within country mine proximity increases in host countries with strong institutions that support collective action. And so collective action that imposes costs on companies is more likely in countries where such institutions are strong. Drawing on both social movement theory and institutional theory, it is suggested that when a government accesses freedom of the press and the judicial system are strong, collective action is better tolerated. This study contributes to the analysis of non-market and institutional risk.
In the literature review section, the authors draw massive peer reviews to give an in-depth elaboration on the theories of social movements and collective action to explain the potential benefits of perspective for firms, including non-market risks and in the global economic, from their peer reviews, show that social movement theory elaborate the situation where collective action by partners dominates institutions, including enabling access to other institutions by permitting partners to influence political and social transformation. The authors further suggest that localized and smaller communities are more effective. They further show that collective action needs social cooperation. The social movement literature review builds on this contention, shows three factors that escalate the probability of collective action. These factors include farming structures, political opportunities, and mobilizing structures. However, there are some researchers that absolutely link collective action to non-market street within administrative setting. Therefore, the authors suggest that there is the need to expand the assessment across borders to evaluate the impact of collective action on companies. Authors applied the concept to the global mining industry from peer reviews to provide more evidence to support their argument. The positive that mine projects are typically situated in remote areas and ecologically sensitive places that are dictated by the presence of miners. According to the authors, the social and environmental impact of mining leads to conflicts with stakeholders and the local communities imposing challenges to the companies. Mining programs are also huge and have a long gestation period, which are complex and are linked to possible social and environmental risks. Every stage offers opportunities for indigenous partners to take collective action, enabling the organization to engage with innumerable partners to help in handling complex environmental and social problems. However, mining activities affect local water supplies as companies compete with local communities over water. Mining activities also lead to water pollution as they result in serious ecological stress. From the analysis of peer reviews, they posit that water pollution is a major global stress, especially in areas where mining activities take place. Based on peer reviews related to mining location, the author posits that proximity to an ecological sensitive source of water expands to the possibility of mining activities to cause ecological damage and competition for valued resource by local communities. From the analysis of peer reviews, the authors exhibit that in most cases, local communities or the pollution around the mining area are typically small in number due to the stress imposed by mining activities. For that reason, the size of the affect pollution and the concentrate localized cost offers powerful incentive for collective action, reducing the free rider issue. Members are socially cohesive in areas affected by the mining and they have robust community networks. Moreover, organizations that impose certain menaces to the surrounding trigger joint action that might wreak reputation defacement on the company. The authors also gave evidence by drawing illustration from the Bakery gold case, revealing the significance of collective action by indigenous communities. The strains imposed by Bakery gold lead to collective action that include legal action, protests, and regulatory inventions that lead to Bakery being fined $16 million for non-compliance with the need to secure water and the glacier's resource. For that matter, the author concludes that the proximity of a mining site to an ecologically sensitive source of water escalate the possibility of non-market rates of mining firms. They, therefore, developed their first hypothesis stating that the more proximate is a mining site to an ecologically sensitive water source, the greater the stock market would discount and any report bringing a mining site nearly to full activities or any report that would extend current output. From the analysis of peer reviews, the author revealed that environmental impacts on local communities and water source vary depending on the types of minerals mined from a given area. For instance, show that gold mining has the greatest impact on water resource and cause conflict between local communities and companies. Gold mining often pollutes local water resource and increase the possibility of joint action. Research on gold mining shows that its extraction consumes more water as compared to extraction of other minerals. They further revealed that high level of water utilized while extracting gold may be perilous to water security in the indigenous groups by fueling their revival for scarce water source in the area. They show El Salvador banned all mining operation due to water scarcity concern in the nation. Therefore, the author have second hypothesis stating that the negative report impact a mining property proximity to an ecologically sensitive water source will escalate when the focal mine is a gold mine. The authors narrowed their peer reviews on water source, revealing that water is a major factor considered in a mining industry and the close water source to a mining site can be a lake or river. However, mining operations negatively impact rivers and lakes differently and impose different problems on local communities. According to the authors, from the river, polluted water by mining activities can spread to several people along the stream. Rivers flow along the pollutants from mining activities spreading across heterogeneous groups. This leads to the diffusion of joint action with heterogeneous groups living along the river to have shared grievance. The authors further persist that there is a possibility of collective action to escalate when a given action diffuses to other indigenous groups and partners. The affect communities, therefore, the government, and seek a robust network to assist them to end the threat from the mining operation, reducing free riding across communities. Therefore, the possible expense to a focal mine are often outstanding when a company uses a river as a water source as compared to a mining operation that depends on water from the lake. They then hypothesize that the negative announcement effects of a mining properties proximity to an environmental sensitive water source will increase when the water source is a river. The authors also drew evidence from peer reviews related to countries where mining activities take place for a better understanding of the global mining industry. They revealed that mining activities in countries rely on both legal and social license to operate. Therefore, the authors posit that ability and capacity of indigenous partners to involve in appropriate joint action is greater and powerful in nations with administrations that empower freedom of information, access to political channels, and movement mobilization. This is because they offer chance for joint action as they offer social, political, and legal avenues for external partners to inflict expense on companies. For instance, the deployment for environmental impact assessment in different countries provides an opportunity for local communities and partners to participate in regulatory hearing. However, legal and social license to operate might pose innumerable regulatory requirements on mining companies as they delay or closure costs on mining operation. In other words, the authors review that legal and social license provide local communities and stakeholders greater access to political opportunity to delay the mining process. The authors therefore contend that when a mine is situated near a major water source in a nation with powerful administration that support joint action, then the possible non-market social and environmental means increase. Thus, the hypothesis that the negative announcement effects of a mining properties proximity to an environmental sensitive water source will increase when host country institutions support collective action.
Data about mining sites from around the world, their location, and announcements regarding their operations and their stock prices were obtained from reliable databases. We further look at the proximity of water sources to these mines, the quality and quantity of water, and institutions supporting collective action. We also take into consideration the political, environmental, and economic standing of that particular country and try to collect data on how these mining sites affect the environment and community in close proximity. We use the event study method to measure how the stock market responds to specific announcements or events of a particular firm. While the study was conducted, the following assumptions were made. 1. The stock market price displays all relevant information. 2. The market response to any announcement represents changes that weren't anticipated. And 3. We don't make any assumptions regarding market imperfection or information symmetry. The study estimates that potential risks from proximity will be felt at each stage of the mining process. An announcement that the firm is entering a new phase provides new information regarding both potential future revenue and cost. Therefore, efficient capital markets will analyze this information and adjust security prices. Announcements that a mine is close to production or has increased production means that it is closer to gaining revenue, but at the same time, investors may be skeptical of the potential increase in cost due to external forces. These external forces need to be re-evaluated depending on the ability and extent of collective action. Thus, capital markets will try to balance potential cost against potential revenue at each stage. This could result in loss if investors are loss adverse. We apply the multi-market event study to calculate the stock returns of mining companies around the days on which relevant mining events occurred. We estimate the following values. 1. Normal returns. Normal returns is calculated using the stock price in a period of 150 days before the event and 31 days after. 2. Abnormal returns. Abnormal returns is calculated by subtracting the predicted return from the actual return. A positive AR implies that an event has an unexpected positive impact on a company's stock return. We use the following variables to estimate our final results. We have one independent variable, which is cumulative abnormal return, which is calculated by adding all the abnormal returns. We compute CAR for 6-day and 2-day windows, and CAR reflects the total impact of an event on a company's stock price. Next, we have four independent variables. The first one is water risk adjusted proximity. The next three dummy variables are from our hypothesis 2 to 4. The first one is whether the mine site is a gold mine or another metal. The second dummy variable is whether the water source is a river which has drinkable water or another water body like a lake or a reservoir. And third, we have institutes supporting collective action, which is a measure of three factors. First, mobilizing structures, which is measured by the extent to which citizens of a country are able to participate in selecting their government, freedom of speech, and free media. Second, political opportunities, which is measured by the degree to which the judicial system in the country is independent of the influence of the government. And third, framing structures, which refers to the freedom given to the media in that country. Next, we have a map that depicts all the lakes and rivers in the world and to what extent do institutes in that country support collective action, with dark brown being the highest support and yellow the lowest. It is interesting to note that Canada is one of the few countries that has the strongest support for collective action.
There are two tables consisting result statistics. The first table shows the correlation between the dependent variable and the independent variables. The second table contains statistics on how the water risk adjusted proximity impacts CAR value. These tables help us to understand how the samples collected supports the four hypotheses that were discussed at the beginning of the presentation. Let's look at how the hypotheses were supported. Based on the results, the moderating effect of gold mines is insignificant. Maybe it requires more specific case-by-case analysis to evaluate this hypothesis. The statistic shows that the water risk proximity lowers the CAR, especially when a mine is located closer to a river. Further, it denotes that the institutional support by a country towards its collective actions causes the changes in CAR magnitude, on which we will be discussing later on this presentation. This graph you see on the slide shows how the success and failures of firms are enabled and constrained by institutions in the host country. The probability of a firm-specific non-market risk from collective action increases with mine proximity to a water source based on fear of scarcity and contamination of water. Stakeholders are likely to take prompt actions to prevent negative effects of a firm. While this graph is high level, the next graph we have shows more detailed country by country and site by site CAR details. Analysis shows that the stock market recognizes the mine's proximity towards environmentally sensitive water sources. This is likely because water is a human right and can cause unique environmental consequences. Mining firms in a country with strong institutions supporting collective actions faces higher degrees of potential non-market risk. Yet, if you look at this map and the previous graph, we can see that the countries with strong institutions has higher and positive CARs than the countries with weaker institutions. We think that the reasons could be the political security, non-primitive, non-violence, collective actions in countries with stronger institutes. Next, in order to validate the sensitivity of the subjects towards the specification changes, the robustness check has been performed. The test has verified that the proximity between focal mines and other various environmentally sensitive sites have no significance between, except leisure areas during a 2-day window.
Continuing on into the discussion, it's argued that non-market risks, which we associate with potential stakeholder collective action, is higher when a mine is located closer to an environmentally sensitive water source. We use proximity as a theoretically grounded proxy for unobservable non-market risk potential and rely on stock market responses to measure it. Our results were consistent and robust in suggesting that stock markets do apply a discount to mine announcements that bring a mine located near environmentally sensitive water source close to production or expansion. Empirical results ground on a model that assumes that the possibility of collective action begins with the local community. When negative externalities are localized and when local stakeholder groups share similar values and interests, free rider problems are minimized. Social movements literature points out that collective action by social movements is relatively rare. Mining operations with the potential to affect the quantity and quality of water sources are more likely to provide the incentives and ability to engage in effective collective action. The empirical analysis undertaken in this paper was from the perspective of investors. Investors respond to non-market risks associated with potential collective action directed at a focal mine. Investor reaction is a mediator between collective action and the ultimate success of the collective action in changing a company's behavior. Extension of the non-market strategy literature by examining the impact of cross-national institutional differences. The use of collective action in social movement theory to justify mine location as a proxy for the incentive and ability of stakeholders' mobilization, which poses a potential non-market risk to mines. The reliance on stock markets to measure the potential form-specific non-market risk and the clear identification of the importance of cross-country institutional heterogeneity are all components of the contribution. The use of proximity to water as a measure of potential non-market risk and examined some of boundary conditions that allow realistic forecasts of future risk for a specific firm in a given location. Stock markets take into account mine proximity to environmentally sensitive water sources. The relative unique nature of water resources encourages and facilitates collective action, and it is therefore important to carefully specify the underlying characteristics of the resources that are potential sources of conflict, the degree to which they encourage groups to mobilize, and the nature of access to political and social structure. On a cross-national setting in countries with strong institutions that support collective action, the conditions for effective stakeholder collective action are more salient. Extend both the international, business, and non-market strategy literatures by focusing on socio-environmental issues using a different theoretical lens. Using social movement theory, we focus on non-market risks that arise from the potential of firms to impose negative externalities on communities. This leads us to conclude that non-market risks are higher in countries with strong institutions supporting collective action. In such countries, firms face a higher probability that they will be affected by collective actions that impose material costs on firms. There are boundary conditions that can affect the incentive and ability of local stakeholders to engage in effective collective action. We find that when the nearest water source is a river, stock market responses are more negative, which we would attribute in part to the increased possibility that collective action may diffuse along the river. Collective action is more likely when population density is high. Free riding is reduced in relatively smaller groups. I'm sorry. Collective action is more likely when population density is not high. Stock markets assimilate all relevant information and this information is available to both investors and firms. Firms face choices regarding the appropriate stakeholder strategy. In summation for this paper, we've seen that stock markets apply a discount to positive announcements by mining companies. A negative response is even stronger when the mines are located in countries with strong institutions that support collective action. Proximity to water sources is a proxy for the potential non-market risks created by localized negative environmental externalities. We extend the analysis across host country institutional environments and suggest that institutional context matters in terms of market valuation of potential environmental and social risks. Contrary to other analyses of non-market risk, in the specific case that we examine, mines located near environmentally sensitive water sources in countries with strong institutions are more likely to have their announcements discounted by stock markets.
So now let's discuss how the hypothesis we discussed earlier relates to Canadian economy. Canada is one of the largest miners in the world, accounting for 19% of the Canada's total domestic exports based on Trade Commission Services Canada, also representing 3.3% of the Canada's total GDP. At the same time, Canada is one of the top 5 countries in the world with the largest renewable water supply, with almost 80% of the rivers has fair to excellent quality, which means The hypotheses 1, 3, 4 are very much crucial to the Canadian mining industry. We need to pay a lot of attention on how the potential focalized negative externalities from mining the environmental sensitive water sources can enable local stakeholders to engage in collective action to prevent such issues. Because mining projects perceived as huge environmental risk can significantly affect communities and their water supplies. The map here shows that Canada is number one globally in equity financing raised for mining and mineral exploration. If you remember the country-wise CAR value map under results section, the CAR in Canada is high and positive mostly. This could be due to the strong institutional support in Canada. It seems that Canada is following a balanced regulatory and normative pillars to make sure the protection of environment, investors, and community. Looking at Canada's journey towards sustainable mining, the TSM concept was initiated and launched in 2004 by the Mining Association Canada, which is now followed by many other leading countries in the world, ensuring that the mining operations are carried out in the most socially, economically, and environmentally responsible way. The strong Canadian brand has made several partnerships with First Nation people to secure social norms and keep using innovations to minimize the environmental risks. Finally, we suggest that the mining locations do matter, especially when closer for an environmentally sensitive water resource. Hence, it is the hand-in-hand responsibility of all governments, different industries, people of all communities, as well as Canadian government towards a sustainable mining culture. Thank you.